Are we good to start? You can hear me? Excellent. Welcome everybody. We are delighted to be here today. It's good to see so many faces in the audience. I was a little bit concerned when I saw that we're up at 12:40 and I realised that is lunchtime, the one thing that nobody can miss. But it's really good to see so many of you here today anyway. We are here to talk today about how we at Schroders are accelerating the success of our predictive client insights. We've come out in force today. So I'm Jeremy, I'm the head of the Client Insights Unit. I'm here with my colleague Cristina, who is our head of Client Data Science, and Mike, who is the head of Enterprise Data Products, if I got that right, Mike. We work for Schroders, and we work in the asset management industry. Now, for those of you that are familiar with that, clients and data are what we do. So we actually invest money, but that's the crux of what we do, and that's why we're here today. And we have the slightly ambitious mission in the Client Insights Unit of trying to change the way that our market goes to industry, which we've sort of put that on ourselves. And today we're going to share some of the stories of the things that have worked well and the things that haven't worked so well, and some of the things that we've learnt along the way. And then Christina's going to be talking a little bit about our products, and Mike will be talking a bit about the factory that supports that. So, who are Schroders? We are an investment manager. We work in asset management. We invest people's money or organisations' money to get a return for whatever their savings goal is. We actually are headquartered here in London, but we have clients based all over the world, something like 30 different countries we operate in. And what does that mean for the industry? What does that mean for a data team within a company like Schroders? Well, just to set a little bit of the context before we get into some of the detail about the industry and the data. We work with relationship managers and we work with sales and marketing teams. These are highly skilled individuals that have built a career on knowing their clients intimately. There's not really been a demand for data in the past. Secondly, our clients do business with us in many different ways. We have business-to-business relationships, business-to-business-to-consumer relationships, business-to-business-to-business-to-consumer relationships. It's complicated. There is no standard approach here that is going to work for everyone. Then, many of our clients are actually intermediated or advised by others, meaning we don't always know who those decision makers are. And that goes for the clients as well. We often have touch points with many, many people across our clients. And so we really need to try and understand who are the people that are making decisions and who are the people that are supporting that. Then how do we win business? This is quite important because what this shows us is our business is lumpy and it's large. We can win multi-million-pound mandates at a time. And that means that we don't have that many success stories to understand what went well and why. And finally, we make money on a revenue subscription model, which means it's not just about sales, it's actually about high quality client service and client retention. And then in the data space, probably like many other organizations, our systems are actually designed for operational purposes. They haven't been designed with insights in mind. And that poses a bit of a challenge. The data can be messy. There are areas of richness, but there are also certainly some gaps. We work with many data vendors as well, and they're popping up all over the industry. They often claim to have the answer that's going to help us solve all of our problems, but often it's really good insight on one small piece of the puzzle. And so we need to think about managing those relationships and the data pipelines and everything that gives us. And that is a real reliance on third parties. For instance, a lot of our client financial information comes from third parties. And so extra work is required around getting that data in good shape and the quality. As you can see, it's a fairly complicated backdrop that we have. But we believe that we are by no means unique and that other businesses are seeing similar challenges. So if any of you are seeing any of these and they relate or resonate with you, then hopefully some of the things we're going to say today might also be helpful. So who are the Client Insights Unit? Our purpose is to derive and deliver industry-leading, client-focused insights, all to better understand and service our clients' needs and behaviours and ultimately lead to increased revenue generation. But we're just one of many teams in the organisation that need data. This is, again, the same that we can see everywhere. And that's why we have the enterprise data function that brings everything together. And Mike will talk a little bit more about that later. Now, the last thing before I hand over to Cristina is to make the points that we talk about today relevant and results focused. We're going to be using this, what we call the Client Insight Maturity Radar. And this effectively shows how the actions we take actually move the dial on one or more of these areas. And it's not always in the right direction, I must add. So we will go through that shortly. But what are they? User satisfaction. That is trust in the service that we offer. It is understanding of the value delivered, adoption of our products. Next axis is value generated, not just the measurable value. We all like to put big numbers on things, but also the perceived value from our stakeholders. Production efficiency, the cost to create our products, but also not forgetting the cost to resolve issues when things go wrong. And finally, the product range, which is live insights and also prototypes. Now, all of these actions, we have been able to move the dial across all of these in a really kind of consistent way. And it's now, what we're on a journey, right? We want to start the conversation here today. So if any of you are on a similar journey, please do come and speak to us. We don't profess to have all the answers. We don't profess to be finished, but we're on that journey and we'll just share some of the things that we've learned along the way. Hopefully some of that will be useful. So I'll now hand over to Cristina to talk through some of the products.
Thank you. Thank you, Jeremy. Well, as Jeremy mentioned, we operate in a very complex environment. We've got lots of types of players. We don't really understand what the relationships between those players are. And this is an area of complexity where data science can help. We started this journey about 2.5 years ago when I joined Schroders, and what you're about to hear is some of the key learnings that we have been gathered during this journey so far. The first one is around having a consulting forum. And this is an area that, if we look at our maturity radar, is going to help us towards having a more relevant product range. This consulting forum is made of senior people in the business. These senior people is really valuable to have because they can really inform what are those strategic goals of the organization where it's very valuable to start with your experimentation. This is something actually I had never had before in previous roles. It was actually set up for me when I joined by Jeremy, and I found it incredibly useful. It also comes with its challenges, and I'll touch upon that later on around the challenges. But one thing to highlight here is that if you can make a difference on a strategic goal of the organization, that is actually something very powerful. The second learning is about start experimenting. And experimenting, when we are experimenting, we want to do it efficiently, so we can actually move the dial down, so more efficiencies around experimenting, so we can drive or value or generate value quicker. And what does this mean? Well, it means don't wait until the data is perfect. Don't wait until the technology and the processes are perfect. Just focus on demonstrating that what you want to do can be done. That piece of analysis, that model, that analysis can actually be done, and it can generate value to your users. Even if that means sourcing data from CSV files, from about to be decommissioned SQL servers, just focus on the experimentation and demonstrating the value. And at some point, after all of that experimentation, one of your products, one of them is going to flourish. You're going to want to implement this product, and you are going to be in a bit of a technology mess because you've been actually sourcing things from all over from different places. But you will have demonstrated that the exercise could be done, and now you're going to have a lot more support from the business to invest in making those technology processes, that data, more suited to data science. Our next learning is about understanding who are the users of your insights, who are the users of your tools. And this will move our maturity radar towards a more value generated, but especially more user satisfaction. And one thing to mention here is that I did mention that we were going to have a challenge with this senior forum of people that you consult with, and this is what I'm going to touch upon. And that, if you like, key challenge is how do you marry up the interests of those senior stakeholders that are supporting you, and perhaps the needs of those actual users of your tools, of your insights, who might actually view differently what is valuable to them, and they might be more concerned about operational matters that perhaps the senior firm didn't really take that much into consideration. This is an area where we didn't get things right at first, for sure. What we learned out of this is that you need to engage with them early. It doesn't really matter if you actually have the support from the senior forum. You need to engage with them early, make them part of your journey, make them part of your team. It doesn't really mean that you're going to be checking with them absolutely everything you are doing, but you're going to bring them a key specific milestones within the product development, so you can sense check if you are in the right track. And some of them are going to be thrilled to work with you, especially the data savvy ones, and some of them won't be as thrilled to work with you. But having those two sets of stakeholders is really important because it's going to help you preempt issues down the line. Our next learning is about beware of intangible factors. And if you can see now our maturity radar, you can see that it's like we are going to slightly backwards on value generated. And this is because this is the moment, this is the place where we have to be realistic about what we can achieve with data science. As Jeremy mentioned before, we have really complicated environment. We've got lots of players. We don't really know who's making decisions, who is related to who. And sometimes someone might come and ask you to work on a specific project, piece of analysis. And when you start scratching the surface, you talk to the experts in the matter, and you realize that this is something mainly driven by intangible factors. It's mainly driven by things you cannot observe, perhaps things you cannot measure, not even by using a proxy. And therefore, even the best model in the world won't be good enough to explain what you're being asked to explain. In this case, going back to our previous point, engage with your stakeholders early and explain why a data-driven approach in this case perhaps not the best option. And our last learning here is to make sure that you measure the engagement and the impact of what you are delivering. This is really going to move the needle in your maturity chart towards more value generated. This is again an area we didn't really get right at first, and we were collecting feedback from the insights from the products that we were delivering, but it was a sort of anecdotal feedback. It was unstructured. It was good, it was positive, but we hadn't really realized how crucial it is to have a consistent, measurable way of looking at our results. One thing we did actually get right was that the fact that we were delivering all of our insights, all of our tools through one single platform, in this case, the CRM system. This means that all of our users had one-stop shop to access all of our information. They didn't have to go through endless emails, dashboards, links to actually find what they needed from us. And this enabled us also in a couple of ways. On one hand, it meant that whenever we were releasing a new insight, or one of our users accessed one of our tools, we could actually see what kind of actions had been taken off the back of using that insight and what outcome came after that action. And that, on the other hand, enables us to use all of that data to feed back into our processes so we could measure if our models were actually having the impact we wanted, were they actually giving the results we expected, and what value those products had or those models had. And with all of this experimentation and learning, we came to a place where we were ready to implement faster. We wanted to upscale. We needed better, more consistent data pipelines. And this is the area that now my colleague Mike is going to be taking you through. Thank you. There you go.
Thank you. Thanks, Cristina. So really, I'm Mike Renwick. I work in enterprise data, which is a more centralized function within Schroders and relatively new. And we have the luxury, because we've started relatively recently, to learn from all of the things that people have experienced over the last few years with a central data function and set ourselves up in a way not to own everything in the center, but instead to enable and set the conditions for success. And really, I wake up every morning waiting for stories like I hear from Jeremy and Cristina of a business team in a business line answering business questions and having an impact on their strategy and on what the business actually does each day with data and with these technologies as a kind of integral part, but not technology-led. And really, within that area, within distribution, there's been a lot of useful learnings from a technical side as well. So going back to that radar diagram, at the point where business value has been established, and really that's the right way up, business first, not technology platform first. You don't build a data mesh and the business will come. We have this opportunity to build that trust, because really this is a trust conversation. And it's about automating those manual processes that we've been talking about assessing the quality of the data that you're producing and consuming, and finding ways to reuse code that you've developed and modularizing. This is all within the factory, and what you can see from the radar diagram is that this increases user satisfaction as the process becomes more dependable and your production efficiency increases. But at this stage, it's not about the product range, it's not about doing more, it's about making what you've got a firm foundation, not just from a technical perspective, but from something that the business can rely on, something that the business feels actually impacts their day-to-day. And as you heard from Cristina, already those feedback loops built in. Those insights aren't just a model going into a report that nobody looks at, but they're surfaced where the business users are, so that they can actually use those insights and mark whether they're useful to them or not, and give us brilliant data as to whether, where we should spend our effort and energy. Next up comes that insight and innovation cycle. Really what we're trying to do here is increase the product range. What you find is that people start asking the question, how do I get more of this? How can we improve the speed here? I've got these other ideas. You start to teach the business the art of the possible. The appetite increases obviously rapidly as well. And it's very important that you've established this way of working, this testing early, hypothesizing, being able to work with the art of the possible, because some ideas will not be deliverable, but some will. And it's that process of failing fast, iterating and allowing for innovation, getting the cogs spinning of the teams involved, and you think cross-functionally here, business teams, technology teams working together, understanding what's possible, and being able to act within their domain to solve a particular problem. And then really meeting that demand, increasing that product range is the goal, and it becomes about adding further rigor to the process, adding facilities, if you like, that make it easier to extend what's being done. whether it be feature libraries and machine learning that support more rapid model development, or automating, monitoring, alerting, etc. What you've done is you've established this the right way up with business demand profile first, and then you bringing the technology to meet the business pain point and problem. So far, I think so. That's, a lot of people in the room would say that sounds right and seems perfectly clear. So what about the enterprise approach, and why am I talking on this stage? Because from an enterprise centralized data facility perspective, what are we trying to do? What's our purpose in this equation? And more importantly, if this is in a particular area, it's a very important area, distribution. It's what brings business into our business. How do we replicate the success across the company? How do we get it to a point where there are more opportunities like this across different teams, and interoperability across this unit? And this is where I think enterprise thinking is coming in. And really, I'm talking data mesh language here for people who you can't really have walked around this conference today and not bumped into a data mesh, and probably still no clearer as to exactly what that means. I'm offering the business side leading into the technology side view of what a data mesh can be, right? So in other words, this is the opportunity. This is, in the past, we would have encountered a group doing something of this nature, and you might consider it a silo. You might say, well, this is great, but it's unevenly spread across your organization. What we want to do is set the conditions for success so that others can replicate the success, and perhaps more easily or even more efficiently learn from this process and replicate and propagate out some of the amazing learnings and successes that this group have had. So when we think of a data product, really often what we talked about is this process of refinement within the domain is pulling together commonly used building blocks out of this process and recognizing that very often you're building something around the concept of a client, and therefore it makes sense to distill that out as a product, run it, own it. Likewise, make it assemblable so that you can combine that data with other data. And that's something that's already naturally happened within this group, and we've been working with them about productizing and decomposing their data into reusable chunks, as we talked about a bit earlier. But really, in the context of things, this is part of a bigger picture. And distribution isn't one domain, it's one of many. And these domains do interoperate, and they do need to share data between them. But not every element of every piece of working inside every part of every data product, which is where the complexity and the spaghetti comes. It's actually understanding how to link these things together and how to set up an ecosystem where people are able to publish their products with information, with business metadata. What is this? What was its purpose? And what is it for? And this needs to serve those products as well. The untold story of distribution is that getting some of that data in is actually a very difficult process in an organization. So what steps can we take to ease that by allowing others who are upstream of them to productize their data, and in turn make the entire supply chain of data mesh if you like, or a data network as I like to think of it, more dependable, more reliable. The other key thing that I want people to understand about data mesh, and the concepts that we want to do here, is that we don't want to put things into a giant data warehouse with a single team running it. That creates a bottleneck. That would stop Jeremy and Cristina from meeting their business needs. It wouldn't create those frustrations and frictions, and have our business leaders, senior business leaders who are part of these councils, eventually direct their attention elsewhere because they're not having the impact here that they want. You need to enable the teams to run their own stack. And the way I've drawn it here, think of it as layers, but although these may be common components that you can see on the floor here today, the point is that the domain owns the entire stack. That the domain can acquire data, process data, make it accessible, manage their metadata, devise and build an ecosystem of products within that domain. Not centrally, not with another team doing the acquisition, not with a different team doing that bit, not as a pass the parcel baton relay race where a dropped baton means that the opportunity is lost, but contained within that domain. So I'm not going to read out all of these things you can all read, but here's some of the points to take away. But I just wanted to leave a few moments for some questions from the audience. If anybody had anything that they wanted to ask about our journey, and have an opportunity to get your response ready. And if you could just tell us who you'd like us to answer as well, because obviously we have a business perspective, a data science perspective, and a text perspective. So
hi, thank you for the talk. Maybe for the client, more the customer insight relating. So it's easy to analyze numerical data, but what about textual data? Can you do that? How do you do that? These sort of things, yeah.
So, sorry, numerical.
So, text,
can you repeat the question?
So textual data. It's easy if you have structured data, but unstructured data, how do you analyze this? Do you use this for, let's say, texts?
Yes, that's a very good question. So I think to start with, we focused on the numerical data, the things that we had at hand that were kind of easier to start experimenting with. And we have just started to actually look into how we are going to be making sense of all of that unstructured data. And we have, well, something we haven't discussed here is the fact that we actually go through processes of innovation every 3 months. And we actually use those processes to start investigating, experimenting new ways of looking at in this case, for example, unstructured data. And in one of our latest innovation weeks, it was actually the teams came up with very nice ways of extracting a specific content out of our meeting notes, for example, some of the text. But it's something that we want to re-explore based on more AI solutions, because that solution requires a little bit of the, business participants to highlight certain things. So. But yeah, it's a good question. We, at the moment, are using some of that in our models and our analysis, but we probably haven't really, it's probably fair to say that we have just scratched the surface around that.
Hello, can you hear me okay? Thank you. Could you walk us through some of the tools that you're using to generate the insights and how you're measuring the impact of that? That's probably for Cristina.
Sorry, I cannot hear the questions.
Shall I repeat it? Can you hear that now?
Yes, better.
Yeah, thank you. Could you walk us through some of the tools that you're using to generate the insights, and how are you measuring the success of those insights?
Yes, so in terms of tools, we use a myriad of them. So from the data science part, I guess you're familiar with Python, IDEs, notebooks, etc., etc. Probably Mike can tell you more about all the technology that goes behind it. But at the moment, we are migrating everything to the cloud. So obviously, we are moving things from specific technologies to others. And we are experimenting and also assessing which of those technologies are going to be better for us. And in terms of like measuring success, or measuring the outputs, it kind of depends on the type of insight that we have created and the tool. So those tools, those insights are created with a specific purpose. And what we try to do is to measure how all of that links, in the different parts of the journey. So how our users interact with it, etc. Sometimes we need to make assumptions as well, because we don't always, unfortunately, get captured the actions that happen after the insight. But if something else happens afterwards, then we can connect the dots. So that's the way we do it. We try to basically follow a trail of everything that happens. And because everything happens within our CRM system, it's kind of easy to see who's accessed this, when, what kind of happened afterwards. Did they open something, a new task? Did they open a new opportunity? Things like that help us then move down to then understanding if our prediction, for example, was actually successful at driving that outcome.
So I have 2 questions actually. First question is your adoption to the cloud, whether you're using any of the cloud features, let's say Snowflake or any of the cloud-based platforms. And the second question is, how does your data pipeline look like at the moment? Let's say, because you're an asset manager, I assume, so you get market data feed, you get feeds from all over the place. and also you send reports to regulators, right? So how do the pipelines work? Do you use any tools? Do you build in-house apps, or how do you actually make it happen?
Sure, so I can answer that. It's essentially an evolving picture, I would say. We are definitely looking at we're using some of the big platforms that you see in the room, Snowflake among them, definitely. But what we have found is different parts of the business have adopted different parts of the stack. Distribution, for example, moved earlier than Snowflake, so they started this journey several years ago. So you don't necessarily need the latest, shiniest tech to achieve the kind of outcomes we're seeing, but definitely Snowflake factors quite highly into a data product landscape. Makes it very easy for people to share data, makes it very easy for people to publish things in a common substrate. And we're certainly looking at pipelining tools, etc. Again, many on the floor, but with a focus of not centralizing those capabilities. So we don't have a central data warehouse team or a central pipeline team. The goal is to integrate those things into a data product template, which we're calling Adapt, that makes it easy for a team that is producing a data product to orchestrate these things. So whether it be ingesting data from the outside world, from a data share in Snowflake, into a mart, shaping it, transforming it, annotating it with business metadata, and then managing it, observing it, and working out how it runs, make sure it's dependable and secure. I'm happy to talk more in detail after the session if you like. I think we're out of time at this point. Thank you very much, everybody, for your time. And
Thank you.